In this video, we are going to learn about using the square root operator to solve quadratic equations. I have two quadratic equations here, one in red and one in blue, and let's start with the one in red. So when I solve an equation, I just want to isolate a variable on one side of the equation. The variable in this case is n, and we know that it's a quadratic equation because n is raised to the second power here. And in order to solve it, like I said, we're just going to try to isolate n on one side of the equation. I'll get the right color here. So I'm going to start by subtracting 10 from both sides. That will give me 9n squared is equal to 81. And then since I'm multiplying n squared by 9 on this side, I want to do the opposite operation, which is dividing by 9. And then I need to do the same thing to both sides, so I divide the right-hand side by 9 also. 9 divided by 9 is 1, so that just leaves me with n squared on the left-hand side. And 81 divided by 9 is 9. And now this is where the square root operator will come in handy. So I'm going to rewrite this line down here. So we have n squared is equal to 9. And I don't care what n squared is equal to, I want to find what n is equal to. And just like we did the opposite operation here, we were multiplying by 9, so we divided by 9. Here we're going to do the opposite operation of squaring n, which is going to be to take the square root of n. So I'm going to take the square root. Taking the square root is the opposite operation of squaring. And whatever I do on the left-hand side, I need to do on the right-hand side. And so the square root of n squared is just going to be n. And the square root of 9 is plus or minus 3. So why plus or minus 3? The way that I like to think about that is that the square root operator is like asking a question. What number multiplied by itself equals 9? We know that 3 times 3 is equal to 9. But there's also another number that multiplies by itself to 9, and that's negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 3 is also equal to 9. And so we have two roots. We have the positive root, which is 3, and the negative root, which is negative 3. And we represent those two cases, or those two scenarios, with this plus or minus sign in front of the 3, because the 3 can be either positive or negative. Another way that we could think about writing that, and I'll signify that with these green arrows here, is that we could write n is either equal to 3 or n is equal to negative 3. And I'm going to put a green box around that because this is my solution. And this would work as a solution also. N is equal to plus or minus 3. Now let's look at the equation in blue. So here we have x plus 3 quantities squared. So we're squaring everything inside the parentheses here, and that's equal to 49. I want to solve for x. So I'm going to start by rewriting this next line, or this first line here. So we have x plus 3 squared is equal to 49. And then just like we did on the left-hand side over here, I want to use the square root operator since that's the opposite operation of squaring everything inside the parentheses here. So I'm going to write this square root sign. And remember, whatever I do on the left-hand side, I need to do on the right-hand side also. And so x plus 3 squared, the square root of x plus 3 squared is x plus 3. So I have x plus 3 on the left-hand side. And then the square root of 49 is plus or minus 7. Plus or minus 7. And we can think about that just like we thought about the square root of 9 over here. What number multiplied by itself makes 49? Well, 7 times 7 makes 49. But negative 7 times negative 7 also makes 49. And so we have two roots. We have the positive root and the negative root. But we're not done yet because we don't know exactly what x is equal to yet. And so I'm going to break this out into cases with these green arrows here. And for the first case, I'm going to consider when 7 is positive. So I have x plus 3 is equal to 7. And my other case is going to be x plus 3 is equal to negative 7. So let's solve the equation on the left here first. I'll start by subtracting 3 from both sides, and that leaves me with x is equal to 4. So there's one of my solutions. The solution could also be what I have on the right-hand side here. I'll subtract 3 from both sides, and that leaves me with x is equal to -10. And so this entire thing is my solution. X can be either 4 or it can be -10. And if we look back look back to the equation that we started with and substitute these values in for x in our head, then we can double check that our work is correct. So if I substitute 4 for x here, then I'm going to have 4 plus 3, which is 7. And 7 squared, like we saw down here, 7 squared is equal to 49. So this solution checks out. But we also need to consider this other solution, which is perfectly valid. If I substitute in -10 for x here, then I'm going to have -10 plus 3, which is equal to -7. And then -7 squared is -7 times 7, which is exactly what I have written here. -7 times -7 is equal to 49. That's solving quadratic equations using the square root operator.